My name is Avery Cole, 23 years old. Most mornings start with the hiss of the steamer wand and the sweet fog of caramel that clings to your hair long after you clock out. I tie on the apron I bought for $3 at a thrift store on Pine, loop my curls into a practical knot, and pretend the coins in my tip jar matter. When Logan slides into the corner booth between classes, he likes to say I'm refreshing, not like the girls who treat money like air, invisible but ever present. I smile and refill his Americano. If performance is a skill, I've become a professional. Secrets need choreography. The studio apartment with the peeling window paint is mine. So is the secondhand couch, the chipped blue mugs, the cracked mirror that flatters no one. I own them the way an actress owns the prop bench she collapses on between scenes. What isn't visible are the iron gates 5 miles away, the drive flanked by copper beeches, the terrace where my mother tends roses with the concentration of a surgeon. What isn't visible is my father, Graham Cole, who builds and unbuilds empires before breakfast. Colemont Partners is what magazines call a legacy firm. I call it my family business. I call it a liability around men who want to climb. High school taught me the physics of falling. One boy, one loose-lipped secret, one spreadsheet of net worths, accidentally forwarded to an entire class. I became a phenomenon overnight. Girls wanting to borrow dresses, boys wanting to borrow time. I learned that money doesn't change people, it reveals them. I promised myself the next person who claimed to love me would love me absent the sparkle. I wanted a control group, thus the coffee shop, thus the jar of quarters, thus the tiny apartment with the view of a brick wall that glows orange at sunset like it's trying. Logan Price thought I was a good story. He liked to watch me count change, liked to slide a bill across the table and say, "I've got this," with the offhand benevolence of a small-town mayor. He joked that Sloan, my best friend, was more his speed when he wanted to talk wine or watches, then added he preferred me because I didn't care about any of it. "You're so real," he said, the night we celebrated his final round interview. He meant you're safe. He meant you make me feel large. Sloan bought me the polka dot mini the week before midterms, said it was retro cute and genuinely you. On her, the same dress would have read as throwback chic. On me, it read as thrift store luck. She understood optics better than anyone, how you could nudge a narrative with a hemline or a hairdo. When she hugged me, I smelled her perfume and the faint bite of ambition underneath. We'd grown up in the same zip codes of privilege, and for years, I thought that meant she understood my reasons. She'd cover for me when I had to disappear for some gala or board dinner. She'd text Logan that my aunt needed me to dog sit, and he'd send a thumbs up. Sloan was the friend who knew the trapdoors in my life and kept them shut, or so I believed. The day it unraveled was so ordinary it hurts. I picked up Logan's favorite pizza, sausage, mushrooms, extra chilies, because he said spicy food was peak pre-interview fuel. I timed the drive to land between his mock interview and his last prep call. I let myself in, key on the third ring of the chain, balancing the box with that domestic confidence I used to think felt like home. The living room smelled like cologne and couch fabric and something sweeter. I said his name once, the way you do in houses that aren't yours. The answer was a scuffle, and then Sloane's laugh, low and careless, the laugh she used when she wanted someone to forgive her before she did anything wrong. They didn't scramble so much as rearrange. Logan grabbed jeans from the floor. Sloane smoothed her hair like a curtain. The pizza box went down on the coffee table with a too loud thunk. I studied the box because it was easier than their faces. "This isn't," Logan began. "It's exactly what it looks like," Sloane said, because she was always the one to press fast forward. "Avery, we've been meaning to tell you. We connect differently." Differently. The word landed like ice water. Logan reached for earnestness, like it was a tie he could straighten. "What we had was real, Ave, but Sloane understands certain things. Ambitions. The finer things," I finished, and I could hear how flat my voice had gone, like glass laid on a table. Opportunities. Sloane's mouth tipped into that almost smile she saved for bad news. "You deserve more than him," she said, which was a kindness disguised as an insult. "You'll find someone who appreciates your values." I set the pizza down with 2 hands, careful not to burn myself. I thought of the first time Logan kissed me by the dumpsters behind the cafe, how proud he was to be messy. I thought of Sloane backstage at a debutante ball, pinning an heirloom clasp while whispering jokes about everyone in the room. It's a trick the mind has. It overlays the best version of a person on the worst moment you ever see them in, like tracing paper that doesn't line up anymore. Months? I asked, and the word fell through the floor and kept falling. Logan's eyes shuddered. Sloane didn't blink. We didn't want to hurt you, she said, a sentence so worn it squeaked. But he needs someone who can help him build the life he's aiming for. Ambitions, I said. My lungs felt wrong, like I'd forgotten how to use them. I turned to the door and was almost there when a simpler part of me, the part that hates bad theater, pivoted back. Logan, I said, good luck on the interview tomorrow. His relief was visible, a loosening at the shoulders, the belief that we were going to be adults about this. Thanks, Fene, he said. That means a lot. And Sloane, I added, you might want to tell him what you forgot to mention about the company. Her face whitened so fast I could see the blood flee. Logan looked from her to me. What company? He asked, slow, wary. The one you've been preparing to charm for 3 weeks. Colmont Partners, I said. The firm where the CEO doesn't hire people who betray his family. Silence is a living thing. It stretched between us, opened its mouth. Logan's jaw did a small, helpless tick. Your dad, he started, and the sentence died like a moth in a porch light. You work at a coffee shop, he tried again, as if facts are mutually exclusive if you say them in the right order. You live in... I choose to, I said. There's a difference. Sloane was recovering, fingers on her hair, smoothing, smoothing. You're lying, she said, but it sounded like she wished I was. I would have known. I would have known you were sleeping with my boyfriend, I said, and I was surprised by how gentle it came out, like an apology I didn't owe. I pulled out my phone. The calendar entry glowed, neat and official. Final round interview with Graham Cole, 10:00 a.m. Colmont Partners, executive level. The number Logan had been calling to confirm was our family office, the one with the receptionist who's known me since I was 5. He stared at the screen as if something might rearrange if he glared hard enough. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Because I wanted to see who you were without the lights on, I thought. Because I needed to know if you'd pick me when I looked like no one's shortcut. Out loud, I said, because I wanted someone to love me for me. He took a step, hands up, and the gesture was so practiced I could see all the times it had worked. Avery, wait, we can fix... No, Sloane cut in, finally panicked enough to tell the truth. You need to fix tomorrow. I almost laughed. There are moments in life when the script you've been writing in your head collides with the one the world insists on, and the noise is spectacular. I opened the door and felt something large settle into place. Not vindication, not rage, just alignment. The hallway outside smelled like old carpet and curry. I could hear a neighbor's television murmuring a game show question about doors, behind door 1, 2, or 3. I didn't think about doors. I thought about glass. When the elevator arrived, I stepped in and caught a ghost of myself in the brushed metal. The thrifted dress looked like a costume. It always had. I touched the polka dots like Braille, as if they might spell out a warning I'd missed. By the time the cab nosed past the iron gates, the beaches were dark with evening. Mum was in the lower garden giving orders with her gloves on, a queenly general among lilies. She turned when she saw me, and all the posing I'd done all year crumbled at the gravity of her concern. Sweetheart, she said, and that was all. I told her everything at the terrace table, words spilling like ice cubes that wouldn't melt. Dad came out quietly and poured tea. Then Ethan, my brother, dropped into a chair and listened with his head tilted like a strategist catching the pattern in a war he'd joined late. So he applies for an analyst rotation at Colmont, Dad said when I finished, voice soft as a scalpel, and betrays you while citing ambition. That's the gist, I said. Ethan's mouth curved. Name? Logan Price. He exchanged a look with Dad that meant more than words, the kind of look you don't get to learn in a cafe. I'll conduct the interview, Dad said, and there was something surgical in the way he said it, not vindictive, precise. Transparency is a gift. Glass, I thought, and heard the elevator's sigh again. I don't want revenge, I said, though I didn't know what I wanted beyond the ache ending. I want this to mean something. It will, Mom said, and her hand covered mine, warm and real in the evening chill. It already does. The house lights came on, one by one, across the lawn like a verdict. Somewhere in the city, a boy ironed his best shirt. Somewhere else, a girl rehearsed a lie. In the morning, the glass room would be very bright. The city looks cleanest at 9:47 a.m., when the sun hits the Colamont Tower just right and turns the facade into a blade. The executive floor is glass and light and the hum of air that keeps the orchids perfect. Dad dresses to vanish. Charcoal, no pocket square. A surgeon in a hospital he built. His assistant Maris leads me to the viewing gallery, a narrow room behind smoked glass with 2 chairs and a line of bottled water. Inside the conference room, the table gleams like a runway. A legal pad waits at Dad's place, a single pen centered above his name. Audio, I ask? Maris taps a discreet button. The room wakes, the ambient purr, the squeak of a door, Logan's inhale sharpening to the bright, hopeful cut I know too well. He's chosen his best suit. It fits like a promise he's been making to himself. Narrow lapels, a tie that wants to be navy but can't help preening a little. He takes the chair that faces the skyline and sits too straight, then remembers to relax. Hands folded, then apart, then folded again. The conference glass reflects him back with a faint delay, as if the building itself wants time to decide what it thinks. Dad enters without pageantry, and something in Logan's posture says he expected a committee, a phalanx, an audience for his flourish. Instead, he gets Graham Cole and the quiet cutlery of questions. Logan, Dad says, as if he's finding the word in a file. Thanks for coming in. Thank you for having me, Mr. Cole. Logan's voice lands in the middle of the table and tries to spread out. This opportunity. Walk me through your last year, Dad says, not unkindly. Not the bullet points, the judgment calls. Logan starts strong. He's rehearsed contact percentages, deal fever, how he taught himself valuation models at midnight while working part-time. He describes ambition like it's a noble animal he tamed. Dad listens as if he's timing a heart. When Logan veers into dreams, long-term, I see myself building enterprise value across sectors, but near-term, I'm a sponge. Dad writes a neat, quiet line and looks up. Family business, he asks. Retail, Logan says. Furniture, regional. How's it going? A Fisher appears, hairline thin. We're pivoting, he says carefully. Tightening margins, optimizing inventory. There have been headwinds. Headwinds, Dad repeats, tasting the word, setting it down. Who carries the losses? Logan blinks. We all do, sir. We, Dad repeats again, as if clarifying a pronoun. You listed a personal guarantee on your financial disclosures? Color rises under Logan's collar. Not personally, but I contribute. Side work, savings, I'm committed. Commitment is measurable, Dad says, almost gentle. Let me ask a different way. When things got difficult at home, did you lean in, or did you start looking for rescue? Logan's throat works. I don't ask for handouts. Good, Dad says, a clipped mercy. He flips a page. You used a reference we don't often see. Sloane Merrick. Logan tries a smile. She's close to my network. Network, Dad says, a neutral word. How do you know her? She's a friend, he says, a close friend. And my daughter? Dad asks, voice still even, almost idle. How do you know Avery Cole? There's the moment where a man decides whether to double down or tell the truth. It happens behind the eyes, a click barely visible, unless you've been waiting for it since last night in a doorway that smelled like cheap carpet and curry. Logan's breath hitches. His hands, which stayed so carefully on the legal pad, tremble. We dated, he says, and he looks very young, for 2 years. And during those 2 years, Dad continues, laying the pen down as if setting a scalpel, what did you think Avery was? A silence that feels like height. Hard-working, Logan says finally. Independent, not wealthy. His voice tries a smile and fails. I didn't care. I loved her for who she was. Dad nods, slow, as if accepting a fact that can't be helped. Loved her enough to betray her, he says, and the sentence doesn't sharpen until the last 2 words. Tell me about loyalty, Mr. Price. It's everything, Logan says too quickly. Trust, reliability, keeping your word. And the version you practice? Dad asks, and the glass hums along the edges. Logan's mouth opens, closes. He does the arithmetic of spin, but the numbers won't balance. I made a mistake, he says. Small. Sloane and I, Sloane, and You applied here, Dad says, cutting neatly through the tangle, and you listed Ms. Merrick as a reference while conducting a private trial of her suitability as a replacement for my daughter. You concealed that from my daughter. You misrepresented the nature of your relationship to Ms. Merrick on your application. Is that accurate? I didn't misrepresent. He stops. The pen in front of Dad casts a thin shadow, a sundial line no clock can read. Sir, I'm a good worker. I can learn fast. I can bring value. No doubt, Dad says, and he means it. He does not confuse competence with character. He does not pretend one can substitute for the other. But Coleman is a family firm in the old sense of the word, not just who sits at our table, but who stands under our roof. We make it a practice not to hire people who show us, in advance, that their first instinct under pressure is disloyalty. Logan breathes out like metal cooling. Please, he says. And the please isn't theatrical anymore. It's the kind you use when you've run out of smart. My family's business is in trouble. I need this job. I'll make it right. Would you have told Avery the truth if she hadn't caught you? Dad asks, almost absent-mindedly, as if it's a footnote he doesn't expect to matter. Logan stares at his hands. The glass throws back an answer he can't say aloud. I'm sorry, Dad says, and it is the real thing. He stands, and the room stands with him. We'll be in touch. There's a particular humiliation to corporate euphemism, how it lets you pretend a door is open as you watch it close. Logan remains seated 2 beats too long, as if muscles need permission to move when a future stops existing. Then he rises, gathers papers that don't matter, and reaches for a smile he used to own. It flickers and dies. He's almost at the door when Dad adds, conversational as weather. Out of curiosity, Mr. Price, if a partner could be swayed by free tickets or family boxes or promises, that is by finer things, would you consider that person an asset to this firm? Logan's head shakes before he can stop it. No, he says hoarsely. They'd be a liability. Agreed, Dad says. And the brief glint of something like pride warms my chest, because he didn't have to set the trap for that definition. Logan built it himself and then walked into it. When the door sighs shut, I realize I've been holding my breath so hard the world went a little gray. Maris lowers the volume to the hush of filtered air. Dad doesn't look toward the glass. He knows I'm there, the way a surgeon knows the family presses their palms to a window somewhere behind his shoulder and prays. He stacks the legal pad square with the table's edge, caps the pen, and sets both down parallel. 2 dark lines that say finished. Ethan opens the gallery door with the air of someone entering a theater between acts. He crashed on loyalty, he says softly. Always the same curve. Do you ever get used to it? I ask. Ethan's mouth tilts. To the moment someone's story meets their choices? You try not to. Dad knocks once on the glass. A habit, never a show, and I follow my brother out. In the hall, the orchids preen in their climate control as if nothing consequential ever happens here. Dad meets us by the elevator, the cool of his palm a steady weight on my shoulder. I didn't want him humiliated, I say, and the words come out fragile. Just seen. He was, Dad says, by himself. We ride down in a mirrored box that throws us back at ourselves. Graham, careful and exact. Ethan, eyebrows arched in permanent analysis. Me, hair pinned into the version of me that belongs here. On the ground floor, glass doors part with their conditioned breath. The lobby's marble holds a faint scent of lemons and power. At the revolving door, I see him. Logan is a pause in a stream of suits, the only person looking up instead of down at a phone. He searches faces with a hunted alertness until his eyes find mine through panes and distance and something older. He lifts a hand, small, just enough that I know he thinks he can still reach me if he says the right combination of words. I don't stop. I stand off to the side with Dad and watch a delivery guy navigate 3 stacked boxes through a gap too narrow, the physics of it gentle and absurd. The boxes sway. The guy steadies. Someone holds a door and doesn't make a speech about teamwork. My phone vibrates. 2 messages. 17 missed calls, dwindled into a banner. Then a new text from a number saved under a name I used to trust. Sloan. Can we talk? It's important. I type nothing. The glass catches my face and hangs it next to Logan's, 2 versions of the same morning laid over the city like transparencies. Somewhere above us, in a room made of windows, a pen lies capped beside a neat stack of paper, and it feels like a metronome has decided to stop. Coffee, Dad asks, ordinary as rain. Strong, I say, And when we step into the light, the door swings closed. On the world we just left, quiet as a verdict that doesn't need to raise its voice. Logan's text arrived again that night, after midnight, short, trembling between confession and command. Please, Avery, just meet me once. I need to explain. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The part of me that wanted closure. It's the same part that touches a bruise to see if it still hurts. Against better judgment, I said yes. We met at a small cafe downtown, not my cafe. I wasn't giving him that stage again. This one was neutral. Brick walls, low lighting, a steady jazz track that didn't care about our history. The waitress recognized me from somewhere she couldn't place, and that suited me fine. Logan was already there, tie loosened, hair messier than usual. The smell of espresso barely covered the desperation coming off him. His cup sat cold, untouched. When he saw me, he stood too fast. Avery, he said, relief spilling into the name. Thank you for coming. I didn't know what else to do. I sat down slowly. Maybe start by explaining why you thought I'd want to see you after you humiliated yourself in front of my father. His face twisted. So you watched? I did. I folded my hands. Consider it a masterclass in accountability. He looked down. I didn't know he was your father. If I had... That's the point, Logan. You didn't know. You didn't care to know. You were too busy aiming upward to notice who was standing beside you. He ran a hand through his hair. Avery, I know I messed up. But when I said I loved you, I meant it. Finding out who you really are, it doesn't change that. It changes what's possible. Possible? I echoed. Like suddenly you see a future again? His voice softened, coaxing. You could help me. I could help you too. You've got power, connections. I've got drive. We could actually build something. I leaned back, studying him. You think this is about money? It's about opportunity, he said, earnest now. I wasn't ready before. I was stupid. But now I understand your world. I can fit in. No, Logan. My voice was calm, almost gentle. You can learn to mimic it, but you'll never belong in it, not because of where you came from, but because of what you value. He blinked. What I value? Yes. You wanted to use my friend to climb, and you wanted to use me to feel noble while you did it. You never once asked who I was when you weren't looking. He opened his mouth, then shut it. His hands clenched on the table. You think I don't regret it? He said hoarsely. I didn't get the job, Avery. I lost everything. My family's drowning. My mom's begging me to fix things I can't fix. You think I don't wake up every morning wishing I could undo it? I tilted my head. Undo it or erase the consequences? He flinched. Does it matter? It does, I said, because regret without reflection is just self-pity. The waitress approached with refills. I nodded, and when the cup was full, I pulled my phone from my bag. You keep talking about what you've lost, I said. Let me show you what that actually means. I scrolled to my photo gallery, images I'd hidden for years. This, I said, sliding the phone across, is our family box at Yankee Stadium. Dad's had it since before I was born. Derek Jeter signed my birthday jersey when I turned 16. He blinked at the picture. You love baseball, I reminded him. Remember how you used to talk about going to a game someday? He nodded numbly. This, I continued, swiping to the next, is our house in the Hamptons. We spend summers there. And this, our ski lodge in Aspen. And this, Mom and Dad at the Met Gala. He stared as if each image added another brick to the wall between us. Avery, please stop. I didn't. And this one, I said, holding up the screen. That's Leonardo DiCaprio in the background. Dad's company sponsors that event every year. He rubbed his temples. Why are you showing me this? Because I need you to understand the scale of what you threw away when you chose lies over loyalty. It's not about the money, he said, voice breaking. Of course it is, I replied. It always was. You wanted someone who could help you climb. Sloan seemed like a faster route. He exhaled hard, words tripping over each other. I thought, Avery, we could have had everything. I smiled without warmth. We almost did. I was going to tell you the truth next month on our 3rd anniversary. I'd planned everything. Dinner at Lairn, the same place Dad closed his first deal. I was going to tell you who I was and offer you a real position at Colmont, a 6-figure salary, travel, the life you wanted so badly. He stared, eyes wide. You're lying. I have no reason to, I said. You were going to meet my parents officially. My brother had already drafted the onboarding schedule. You would have been Ethan's assistant. Logan's breathing grew shallow. A job at Colmont, starting salary, $180,000. Plus bonuses, plus stock options. But you didn't want honesty. You wanted leverage. So you traded me for Sloan and her father's dying dealerships. He pressed his palms against his eyes. Stop, please. I can't, I said, because I need you to see it. Really see it. You weren't punished, Logan. You disqualified yourself. He looked up at me then, eyes red. I can fix this. I can talk to your dad. I can make it right. I shook my head. This isn't a job interview anymore. This is life, and you already failed the test. He reached across the table, voice cracking. I love you, Avery, not your money. You. I pulled my hands away. Then you loved the version of me who let you feel superior. The barista who counted coins while you played provider. The girl who made you believe you were enough. You loved the lie. Tears welled, but he didn't move to hide them. I made a mistake, he whispered. I just wanted more. You had more, I said quietly. You just couldn't recognize it. He sagged back empty. I stood. You want to know about the finer things, Logan? They're not yachts or seats at the Met Gala. They're character, decency, loyalty, the things money can't buy and betrayal can't fake. As I walked away, I felt him watching, but I didn't look back. The rain outside had started without warning, city lights bleeding into puddles. I opened my umbrella and caught my reflection in the glass door. No longer the girl performing humility, just a woman walking into her truth. That night, I deleted every message he'd ever sent. But I didn't block him. Some lessons, I thought, deserved to be seen in real time. By the next morning, word had spread quietly through the circles Sloan and I used to share. She hadn't texted again, but I knew she would. People like her don't surrender. They pivot. And when she did, I'd be ready. Sloan's message came 3 days later. A soft trap disguised as an olive branch. Avery, please. Let's talk. Not about Logan. About us. I almost ignored it, but curiosity can be its own form of weakness. So I agreed. Not at her apartment, not anywhere sentimental, but at the rooftop bar of the Whitmore Hotel, one of the last things her family still owned outright. It was early evening, the sky still pink, and the city below hummed with the easy arrogance of people convinced they'll never fall. She was already there when I arrived, backlit by sunset and champagne bubbles, every inch the composed socialite. If guilt had a scent, Sloan had disguised it under designer perfume. Avery. She stood, arms open. You look incredible. So do you, I said, though her smile was stretched too thin, her voice brittle around the edges. We sat. The waiter hovered. She ordered for both of us without asking. She always had. A habit, she used to say when we were friends. After a long silence, Meow and Sloan exhaled. You know I didn't plan to hurt you. You planned something, I said. You just didn't expect it to backfire. Her eyes flickered. Logan told me everything. About your family. About your father's company. You could have told me, Avery. We've known each other since we were 8. I did tell you, I said quietly. You just stopped listening after you learned who my father was. The waiter placed 2 flutes of champagne on the table. Bubbles rose like tiny, perfect lies. Sloan toyed with her glass. My father's business is collapsing. The dealerships are half what they were last year. The only way out is my trust fund. I'm aware. Her eyes snapped up. You? What? I know about your grandfather's clause, I said. The one that requires you to marry someone from the approved family list before you're 25 to unlock your inheritance. Color drained from her face. How do you... My family's been on that list for 3 generations, I interrupted. Our grandfathers sat on the same charity boards. You really thought I wouldn't know? Sloan sank back in her chair, shoulders stiff. So what? You came here to rub it in? To humiliate me? No, I said, leaning forward. To make you understand what you traded friendship for. You thought if you could steal Logan from me, you could slide him into my world, marry him, use my family's proximity to check your little box. You didn't even check if his name was on the list. Sloan blinked, disbelief giving way to dread. You're lying. I slid a folder from my bag, the updated trust register, courtesy of our family's legal team. I laid it on the table and flipped to the P section. Do you see a price anywhere? Her eyes scanned desperately, then stopped. Blank space. No price. No, she whispered. Oh, yes, I said. He was never eligible. Even if you married him, you'd lose everything. Her hand went to her mouth. I didn't think... That's your problem, Sloan. You don't think. You scheme. She shoved the folder away. You could still help me. Sponsor me for board positions. Introduce me to the right people. I could earn the credit another way, right? I sighed. Yes. There's a clause your grandfather added for family members who don't marry. Something about charitable alignment. It allows fulfillment through community service, volunteer leadership, public trust roles. Her eyes widened. You mean I could have satisfied it without marrying anyone? Yes, I said. You could have hosted fundraisers, served on nonprofit boards, joined the right foundations. 2 years of that, and your trust would have been safe. She stared at me like a woman realizing the house she'd set on fire was her own. I could have fixed this, she whispered. I could have... Not destroyed your best friend's relationship, I finished for her. Sloane's voice cracked. I never meant for it to happen like that. Then how did you mean it to happen? She blinked back tears. I was desperate. My father's drowning, and I thought if I secured my inheritance, I could save him. I didn't think I'd lose you too. You didn't lose me, Sloane, I said softly. You sold me for a lifeline that never existed. The wind picked up, brushing her hair into her eyes. For a moment, she looked almost human again. Not the poised schemer, but the girl who once snuck into my room at boarding school after curfew, laughing at nothing and swearing we'd never let money define us. I'm sorry, she whispered. Please, Avery, help me fix this. Just one introduction, one sponsorship. I'll volunteer anywhere you say. I'll do anything. I pushed my chair back slowly. You want forgiveness, but what you need is responsibility. My family built everything we have by understanding one rule. Every choice has a price. You made yours. She reached out, grabbing my arm. Don't do this. Don't turn your back on me. I looked down at her hand, manicured, trembling. That's exactly what I'm doing. As I walked toward the elevator, her voice broke behind me. What about second chances? I turned back, the city wind catching my hair. Second chances are earned, Sloane, not requested. The elevator doors slid shut between us, her reflection splitting in two as they met. That night, I stood at my window, watching the rain blur the skyline. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Merrick Auto Group faces foreclosure amid mounting debt. I didn't smile. There's no pleasure in watching karma do its job. There's only recognition, the symmetry of cause and effect. By the next morning, Sloane's name was trending in certain private circles. Whispers of desperation, rumors of older suitors, frantic attempts to repair what she'd broken. And for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet stillness that comes when you stop protecting people from the consequences they begged for. But peace never lasts long in my world. Not when the past still has my number. Because that same afternoon, as I was closing out my coffee shift, the one job I kept to remind myself who I used to be, Logan walked in. He didn't look like a man chasing redemption. He looked like a man who'd run out of exits. Avery, he said quietly, voice frayed. We need to talk. I stared at him across the counter. We really don't. But something in his eyes, that mix of guilt and panic, told me that whatever came next wasn't over. Not yet. And in my chest, the calm I'd earned began to shift again, like the first rumble before another storm. Logan waited until the last customer left before stepping closer, his reflection trembling against the glass pastry case. His once perfect suit was rumpled, eyes red from nights without sleep. I'd spent months imagining what I'd say if I ever saw him again. Now, standing behind a counter that smelled like burnt espresso and vanilla syrup, I realized I didn't feel anger anymore, just exhaustion. Avery, he started, please hear me out. I didn't move. You already said everything that mattered. You just said it to someone else's face. He flinched. I deserve that. But I'm not here to beg. I just want to explain. Explain what? I asked quietly. That your family's business failed, and now you regret choosing the wrong heiress? He winced as if the words were physical. We lost the stores last week, he said. Everything my parents worked for. I've been applying anywhere that'll take me. Warehouse jobs, delivery gigs. I wanted you to know I understand now what loyalty really means. I wiped the counter slowly. You think understanding is the same as redemption? No, he said, but it's a start. Something in his voice, unpolished, stripped of performance, almost reached me. Almost. Then I remembered how easily he'd said Sloane's name with affection while I stood there holding pizza boxes like a fool. You didn't just hurt me, I said. You mocked me. You used the image I built to test who would stay beside me when I had nothing. And you failed that test so fast it's almost impressive. Logan's throat worked. I didn't know who you were, Avery. I didn't know what I was throwing away. That's the point, I said. If you needed to know my last name to treat me well, you were never capable of love. The espresso machine hissed, filling the silence. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. I'm not asking you to take me back. I need you to know I'm sorry. I nodded once, but not for him, for myself. I'd wanted that apology more than I'd wanted revenge. And now that I had it, it felt like a receipt for something I no longer wanted to own. When he finally left, I locked the door and leaned against the counter. Outside, his reflection disappeared into the rain. I closed my eyes and let the sound of thunder drown out the past. A week later, my family hosted our annual charity auction at the downtown art museum. Usually I avoided those nights, but this year felt different. I'd spent too long hiding behind thrift stores and chipped mugs. Maybe it was time to stop pretending humility meant invisibility. The museum glowed like an ember against the gray city. Waiters in black moved through crowds of silk and diamonds. For the first time, I arrived as myself, not the barista, not the girl testing loyalty, but Avery Cole, daughter of Graham and Julia Cole, future board member of the Colemont Foundation. Welcome home, my brother Ethan murmured, slipping a glass of wine into my hand. Don't start, I said. I'm not, he said with a grin. Just proud you finally remembered your last name. He drifted away to talk to investors, and that's when I saw him, standing near the silent auction table, studying a painting with his hands in his pockets. He was tall, clean-cut, in a suit that looked expensive but lived in. Something about the way he leaned in, curious, not performative, made me pause. He noticed me watching and smiled. Beautiful piece, isn't it? It is, I said. But 30,000 seems steep for something so small. He shrugged. Art's like people. The story behind it changes the price. I raised an eyebrow. And what story do you think this one tells? He studied it again. Someone letting go. You can feel it in the brushstrokes. I smiled. That's remarkably perceptive for a stranger. Daniel Hart, he said, offering his hand. Our firm handles legal work for the Foundation's pro bono cases. So he wasn't just another guest chasing donors. Avery Cole, I said, shaking his hand. He didn't react to the name. No spark of recognition. No performative surprise. Just a nod. Nice to meet you, Avery. We talked for almost 2 hours, moving from art to coffee to travel. He never once asked about my family, my money, or what I drove. He asked about my favorite books, the weirdest customer I'd ever served, the last time I laughed so hard I cried. When the auction ended, he glanced at his watch. Would you let me take you for coffee sometime? He asked. I hesitated, smiling despite myself. You should know something before you decide that. Oh? My family has money, a lot of it. Like Forbes list, jet hangar, compound with a gate money. He blinked, thoughtful, not alarmed. And you're telling me because? Because I don't lie about who I am anymore, I said. If that changes anything, better to know now. He studied me for a moment, then smiled softly. Well, I was already interested before I knew about the jet, so I guess I'm safe. I laughed, something light and unfamiliar loosening in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I saw each other often. Museum lunches, walks through Pike Place, the kind of slow, steady rhythm that felt almost alien after the chaos of Logan. He never asked for access, introductions, or favors. When he learned I still worked at the cafe, he dropped by once with a simple order and left the biggest tip of the day, but never mentioned it again. The contrast was dizzying. Logan had chased advantage. Daniel carried patience like armor. He didn't need to impress anyone, but ghosts have long half-lives. One afternoon, while Daniel and I sat outside a bookstore downtown, I caught sight of Sloane through the crowd. She was thinner, paler, her hair too perfectly brushed to hide the cracks. Her arm clung to the elbow of a man twice her age, his hand resting possessively on hers. I didn't need an introduction. That was Ridley Pate, one of the approved names on her grandfather's list. Our eyes met for one long electric second. She looked away first. Daniel noticed. Friend of yours? Something like that, I said. A lesson, mostly. He didn't press. That was the moment I realized I trusted him more than anyone I'd met in years. Weeks passed, and I watched Sloane's headlines like storm warnings. Photos of her engagement to Ridley flooded society pages. Everyone whispered about the age gap, the transactional sparkle in her smile. I didn't feel vengeance anymore, just inevitability. Meanwhile, Daniel and I were steady. He was kind where Logan had been clever, grounded where Sloane had been calculating. For the first time, I wasn't performing. When he met my parents at a charity dinner, Dad liked him instantly. He listens, Dad said afterward. Rare quality. And yet, as I drove home that night, a new shadow tugged at me, because Logan hadn't truly vanished. He was still out there, a living reminder that the universe never wastes irony. I just didn't know then that he was about to step back into my life in the most humiliating way possible. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of forgettable weekday that tricks you into thinking nothing dramatic ever starts there. Daniel and I had just left the gym. He'd been training for a charity marathon. I'd been pretending to train, mostly to spend extra mornings with him. We were walking toward his car, laughing about how I'd nearly fallen off the treadmill, when a voice called my name across the parking lot. "Avery!" I turned before I could stop myself. "Logan." He looked smaller somehow. Shoulders hunched, expression desperate but practiced. His t-shirt clung to him in all the wrong ways, like he'd spent too long trying to look casual. He was holding a duffel bag and a nervous half-smile. Daniel froze beside me, every inch of him going still. "I didn't mean to intrude," Logan said quickly, hands raised. "I just needed a minute." "Now's not a good time," I said, keeping my voice level. He glanced at Daniel. "You must be Daniel." Daniel gave a slow nod. "And you must be Logan." For a moment, no one spoke. The rain from earlier had left the asphalt shining, each puddle catching fragments of sky. Logan's reflection shimmered in one, fractured and unsteady. "I only came to say something," Logan said. "To both of you, actually." I folded my arms. "Then say it." He looked at Daniel. "She's not what she seems." Daniel's eyebrow lifted slightly. "I've heard that before, usually from people who find out too late what she really is. Honest." Logan's jaw twitched. "You think you know her? You don't. You have no idea the kind of control her family has. They'll pull you in, make you dependent, and when they're done—" "Stop," I said sharply. He turned to me, anger flaring. "I'm trying to help him before he ends up like me." "Like you?" I repeated. "You mean unemployed, indebted, and still blaming everyone but yourself?" Daniel stepped closer, quiet but firm. "Logan, I appreciate your concern, but you don't know me, and you definitely don't get to speak for her." Logan's expression flickered. This wasn't going the way he rehearsed. "You don't understand," he said to Daniel, voice cracking. "Her dad, he'll test you the way he tested me. He'll destroy you if you make one wrong move." Daniel nodded slowly. "So, let me get this straight. You cheated on her, lied to her, and now you're trying to paint her as the villain because your own ambition imploded?" Logan's face tightened. "I made mistakes." "Yes," Daniel said. "And now you're making another one." Something in Daniel's tone, calm, unshakable, shut Logan down more effectively than anger ever could. He stepped back, defeated. "Avery," he said softly, "please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you don't have to hate me." I looked at him for a long moment. "I don't," I said finally. "Hate takes energy. You're not worth that much." He blinked, like I'd struck him without raising a hand. Then he turned and walked away, each step echoing against the pavement until he vanished behind the rows of parked cars. Daniel watched until he was gone, then turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded. I think that's the first time he's ever walked away without trying to win. Daniel smiled faintly. "You handled that better than I would have." "Really?" "Oh, I would have used shorter sentences," he said dryly. I laughed, an involuntary surprise sound that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. That night, over dinner, I told Daniel everything. Not just the edited version, but all of it. The fake modesty, the betrayal, the interview ambush, the trust clause, the confrontation. He listened without interrupting, elbows on the table, expression open. When I finished, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was full. "Well," he said finally, "you definitely have a talent for dramatic arcs." I smiled faintly. "You're not scared off?" He shook his head. "I'm more impressed than anything. You spent 2 years testing the world to see who'd love you for you. It's not your fault the wrong people failed." "I keep wondering if I set it all in motion," I admitted. "If maybe by hiding who I was, I created the kind of lie that made betrayal inevitable." Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand. "Avery, you didn't cause their betrayal. You exposed it." Something in my chest eased. He squeezed my hand once. "For what it's worth, if I'd met you counting quarters or flying private, I'd have fallen either way." I laughed softly. "You don't even like flying." "Exactly," he said, grinning. "That's how you'd know it was real." Months passed quietly after that. Logan drifted back into the background, like a bad memory the world finally forgot. My life took on new patterns. Morning runs, meetings at the foundation, late dinners with Daniel where the conversation always circled back to the same grounding truth. Honesty felt easier than performance. Even my father noticed. "You seem lighter," he said one evening on the terrace. "Like you've stopped auditioning for your own life." I have, I told him. Turns out, being myself was the only role I hadn't tried. He smiled in that rare, proud way that meant more than applause. Good, he said, because people who fake smallness rarely get the chance to grow big again. But peace, I'd learned, has a strange way of testing you. It was Ethan who mentioned it first. A screenshot from social media slid across the breakfast table with his coffee. Sloan Merrick, engaged to Ridley Pate, 67-year-old shipping magnate. The caption underneath read, "The Merrick family secures their legacy once again." Except they didn't, because 6 months later, that same headline changed. Ridley Pate, files for annulment, claims fraudulent marriage contract. By then, Daniel and I were living half our lives between work and travel. But that morning, as I read the article, all I could think was how tired Sloan must have been. Tired of pretending, of gambling, of losing. Dad folded the newspaper with surgical precision. Some people don't fail. They self-destruct. I nodded. She'll blame me for it. She can, Dad said simply, but you don't have to listen. A month later, on a Sunday grocery run, I saw Logan again. He was working the register at the store near our apartment, the same store where Daniel and I bought wine for dinner parties. His name tag read Logan P. When our eyes met, he froze. Then he forced a smile. "Hey," he said, "need any help with bags?" I glanced at the conveyor belt. Imported cheese, organic produce, a bottle of Bordeaux. He saw them too. The life he'd wanted reflected in groceries. "No thanks," I said. He scanned the items silently, his hand trembling slightly. The total flashed on the screen, $412.37. "Card or cash?" he asked. "Card." I handed him my black Amex. He took it without comment, but the flicker in his eyes was unmistakable. Recognition, humiliation, memory. As the receipt printed, he whispered, "I really am sorry, Avery." I met his gaze. "I know," I said. "That's why I don't need to hear it again." He nodded, defeated. "Have a nice day." "You too." Daniel was waiting outside, leaning on the car, sunlight catching his hair. As I walked toward him, I felt the weight of every past choice settle. Not heavy, not haunting, just done. I glanced back once. Logan stood behind the glass doors, watching me leave, his reflection trapped inside the store's fluorescent light. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel vindicated, just free. The past, I realized, had finally stopped chasing me. Freedom feels quiet when it finally arrives. Not cinematic, not a grand crescendo, just the gentle silence after years of noise. That week, Daniel and I moved into a new apartment overlooking the harbor. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows every morning, catching the edges of our coffee mugs and the small stack of books he insisted on keeping by the kitchen window. It wasn't one of my family's properties. We chose it ourselves. Neutral ground. Ours. I still worked a few shifts at the cafe. By choice now. When customers complained about milk froth or spilled sugar, I smiled. There was something cleansing about serving strangers who didn't know my last name. But news travels fast in quiet circles. Sloane's downfall had become dinner party folklore. The tabloids wrote about her short-lived society marriage, the whispers hinting that her new husband, Ridley Pate, had annulled the marriage after discovering her motives. The trust clause she'd gambled on was void. Her inheritance evaporated overnight. Her father's dealership shuttered within months. I thought I'd feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing, maybe pity. Late one night, an email arrived from her. "Subject, please, just listen. Avery, you don't have to respond. I just want to say that I'm sorry. You were right about everything. About the clause, about Ridley, about me. I thought money would keep my family safe. Now I'm the reason we lost everything. I hope someday you can forgive me." Sloan. I hovered over reply for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. Some apologies aren't meant to be answered. They're just meant to exist, like gravestones, reminders of what used to live. Dad once said something that stuck with me. Power only reveals character faster. Watching Sloan and Logan unravel proved him right. They both wanted shortcuts to the life they thought they deserved. But shortcuts only show you what you'd sacrifice to get there. When I saw Logan again for the last time, it was by accident. I'd stopped at the grocery store on my way home, still in heels from a foundation gala. The automatic doors sighed open, and there he was at checkout, ringing up a line of customers. His name tag had faded, and his shoulders slumped like the world had shrunk around him. He looked up, and for a heartbeat, the air between us froze. "Avery," he said quietly. I smiled politely. "Evening, Logan." He swallowed. "How are you?" "Good," I said. "Busy." He nodded, fumbling with a bag of oranges. You look happy. I am. That single truth seemed to hollow him out. He nodded again, eyes wet, and whispered, I'm glad. For the first time, I believed him. I paid, took my receipt, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air smelled like rain on asphalt. Clean. Final. Months later, word got around that Sloane had taken a job as a receptionist at a dental office in the suburbs. Logan still worked at the grocery store. Sometimes life doesn't punish. It simply lets people live with the version of themselves they created. And me? I finally stopped apologizing for being who I am. I joined my father's firm's philanthropic board, started a mentorship program for underprivileged students, and began speaking publicly about women in finance. Each time I stood behind a podium, I remembered the girl in the thrift store dress who hid her name like a secret, and I thanked her for surviving long enough to tell the truth. One evening, Daniel and I hosted a dinner at the apartment. Nothing fancy, just friends, laughter, the smell of roasted garlic and wine. When I looked around the table, I realized something that startled me with its simplicity. Every person there had earned their seat. No one needed my last name to stay. After dinner, as we washed dishes side by side, Daniel looked at me and said, You've been smiling all night. Feels like the end of something. Maybe it is, I said. Or maybe it's just peace finally staying for dessert. He chuckled. You should write that down. Too late, I said. Already did. The following spring, we went back to the Hamptons for the first time since everything fell apart. The estate looked the same. Clipped hedges, soft salt air, waves whispering against the rocks. But I wasn't the same girl who'd once fled here in heartbreak. I was someone who'd learned that revenge and justice aren't synonyms. Mom met us in the garden, her gloves flecked with dirt and satisfaction. You look happy, she said. I am, I replied. Finally. Dad joined us, his expression softer than usual. I hear congratulations are in order. I blinked. For what? He smiled. Daniel asked me for your hand yesterday. Very old-fashioned of him. My breath caught. He did what? Daniel appeared at the doorway, holding a small box and looking utterly guilty. I was hoping you'd say yes before your father mentioned it. I laughed, a sound that startled the roses and made my mother cry. Yes, I said, absolutely yes. We were married 6 months later, beneath a canopy of wisteria in the garden where I'd once confessed betrayal. The same breeze that carried my tears then now carried laughter. As I walked down the aisle, I caught sight of familiar faces, friends, colleagues, people who had stayed. No Sloane, no Logan. Some absences are their own gifts. When the ceremony ended and the music swelled, Daniel leaned close and whispered, You look like you finally believe you deserve this. I do, I said, because I earned it. That night, under this canopy of stars above the water, I thought about the past, the lies, the masks, the painful lessons, and realized they'd all been necessary. Without them, I wouldn't have recognized real love when it finally showed up quietly, with steady hands and no agenda. I'd spent years hiding my name to see who would stay. In the end, the only person I needed to stop hiding from was myself. The morning after our wedding, the ocean mist rolled over the garden like a memory that had finally learned to whisper. Daniel and I stood barefoot on the terrace, coffee in hand, watching the waves erase footprints from the night before. The music, the laughter, the shimmer of glasses under fairy lights, all gone, replaced by something softer. Stillness. This, Daniel said quietly, feels like real life. I nodded. Finally. He smiled. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were untouchable, like someone carved from marble in private schools. And now? Now I know you're just someone who likes her coffee too strong and forgets to put gas in her car. I laughed, the sound startling a pair of seagulls nearby. Don't romanticize my bad habits. Oh, I'm not, he said. I just love them anyway. That week we left for Italy, a quiet honeymoon, no press, no posts, no hashtags, just us. We wandered through vineyards, got lost on winding streets, argued about gelato flavors, and learned to exist without constantly explaining ourselves. There were moments, small and unexpected, that reminded me of how far I'd come. When Daniel held my hand in a crowded piazza without flinching at the curious looks, when I signed our hotel bill with my full name and didn't feel the urge to apologize, when I looked at him and realized he wasn't impressed by the life I came from, only grateful to be part of the life we were building. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he asked, Do you ever think about them, Logan and Sloane? Sometimes, I said honestly, not out of anger, more like curiosity. Curiosity? I wonder if they've learned anything, if they ever stop to think about how small choices become whole lives. He nodded, thoughtful. Do you want to know? No, I said after a moment, because it doesn't change mine. When we returned home, a letter was waiting for me. No return address, just a familiar looping script. I knew before opening it. It was from Sloan. Avery, I'm working at a dental office now. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. I see people every day who have nothing to hide behind. Maybe that's what I needed, to start over where no one knows my name. I wanted to thank you, not for what happened, but for what it taught me. You once said that every choice has a price. You were right. I've paid mine, and for the first time, I'm debt-free in the ways that matter. I hope you're happy. Sloan. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the back of my journal. Forgiveness, I'd learned, doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to let the past stop defining the present. As for Logan, I never heard from him again. Word through mutual circles was that he'd moved back to his hometown, helping his mother run a small consignment shop. Maybe that was his own form of redemption, an unglamorous kind, but real. 2 years later, I stood on stage at a fundraising gala for the Coleman Foundation, addressing a room of donors and young scholars. The chandeliers shimmered like constellations overhead, but it wasn't the luxury that struck me. It was the people. Students whose families had lost everything. Single mothers balancing night school. The kinds of people my past self pretended to be just to learn what they already knew. Humility isn't something you fake. I shared my story, not the scandalous details, but the heart of it. I used to think hiding who I was would protect me, I told them. That if people didn't know my family name, they'd see the real me. But the truth is, honesty isn't about exposure, it's about courage. Sometimes the hardest person to be honest with is yourself. The applause was quiet at first, then warm, genuine, the sound of understanding rather than approval. Afterward, Dad found me near the stage. You spoke well, he said. I think your mother cried twice. She always does, I smiled. He studied me for a long moment. You know, Avery, I used to worry the world would eat you alive. Now I think you might feed it instead. That night, Daniel and I walked home through the city. The skyline shimmered above us. The same lights that once felt like walls now looked like stars. Do you ever think, he asked softly, that all of this, the betrayals, the heartbreaks, was necessary? I do, I said. Without them, I'd still be hiding behind someone else's version of me. He slipped his arm around me, and now? Now I know my worth, and I don't measure it in money, or apologies, or revenge. We stopped at a crosswalk. The wind carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a street cart nearby, earthy, comforting, human. I turned to him and said the truth that had waited years to be spoken aloud. Sometimes the most valuable things come in humble packaging, and sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is not recognizing treasure when it's right in front of you. He smiled. Sounds like the perfect ending to a story. It's not an ending, I said, taking his hand. Just the beginning of one we write together. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story too.